Welcome to the Lovecraft Country Discussion Group podcast. This is episode 10, Full Circle. We have our illustrious hosts, Taylor Made, Iyeli Icheli, Mike Richardson, myself, Justin Davis, and Pamela Wood. This is the Lovecraft Country Discussion Group podcast.
Okay, finale episode. Initial thoughts, because that was a lot.
Whew, let's all breathe.
I was excited. I was ready to do some magic. I went in the kitchen like, how much salt do I got? Because I was going to figure out something. I was really excited about this episode.
Did you pour it around the house, Mike?
I only had one box. I didn't have like 50 boxes like Montrose, so I didn't have enough. I didn't want to get yelled at for using all the salt to add some spells.
I found that very affirming because my salt already down. Okay, my salt is there. Okay, so but it was I was ambivalent. There were some things I really enjoyed about the episode and some things that I really kind of didn't. It wasn't one of my favorites, but I still love the show overall. So, but yeah, we'll talk about that more. But yeah, it was.
They jumped right into it too. We just started off on fire. Okay, let's get into this theme of the only begotten son, because we cannot ignore the biblical references in this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of theology in this episode. So you see in the first vision with Hannah, where she tells Tick the answer's in your blood and you're going to save them all, which you see that they've been, and especially in this episode, setting Tick up as the Christological figure of the show. And then right after that, he has this Garden of Gethsemane moment where in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is praying to the Father, let this cup pass from me. He doesn't want to do what he's about to do in terms of being crucified. And Tick, instead of praying to his father, he has his mother there and he's crying with her saying he doesn't want to die. So you got the Garden of Gethsemane, then right after that, you have the baptism as the same thing as Jesus had with John the Baptist. And you got the crucifixion in the way he was positioned on the wheel. And then you even have some Mariology in there where Letty goes to see Hattie, and Hattie is playing the Angel Gabriel role and talking to her about the child in her womb and things. So then when you set Letty up to be that figure, when you see the women, when Tick is being killed, it's similar to Jesus and the people who loved him, the women and his brother, were at the foot of the cross. And so they're at the foot of that thing or the bottom of that thing where Tick is, watching this crucifixion event. So they've done a lot of work in setting him up as the Christ figure of this episode.
Mm-hmm. And this notion of sacrifice and struggle love, because we've been seeing this throughout the whole series, and it just sort of culminates in this finale. Thoughts on struggle love?
So can I set this up first? So the sacrifice, this is where I didn't really like the direction that the writers took. So the Christ story is so ubiquitous that everyone kind of knows it. But the importance usually is placed in a few places. It's either Christ's death on the cross, where he says, it's finished. That's where Jesus did the work. Some people say it's in between his death and the resurrection, where they say Jesus ransomed or paid for our sins. And then, that's usually a deal with the devil, and he went to set the captives free and all of that stuff. Some people say it's a third way that Jesus did the work in the resurrection by giving hope. And so all of those three ways of viewing Jesus' sacrifice are common ways of seeing it. But something happened in the 1960s where James Cone looked at this theology and said, hey, wait a minute, we got a civil rights movement going on. This theology says nothing about what's going on outside my window. That opened up discussion about what the theology is. And so you see Black women scholars or womanist scholars come onto the scene, and they raise a fourth way to look at Jesus' life and work. And that is pull it down from the cross and into Jesus' life. So now Jesus is doing liberation work in his life, amplifying the voices of women healing the sick. He's providing health care. He's restoring relationships. He's doing all of this work for 3 years. And the cross then becomes the state response to Jesus's liberation work in his life. And scholars like Dolores Williams and Renita Williams would say, this is important to see it this way, because if you continue to put the emphasis on the cross, there's this nobility in the suffering and sacrifice that ends in the sacrifice of life. And that is harmful for people, Black people especially, but also Black women who are forced to stay in relationships because there's believed to be some nobility in suffering. And I call this the theology of suffering, that there's value in suffering and it will be rewarded. And in most cases, you have to die to obtain that reward. And the theology is dangerous for Black people because we're the ones who are handling all the suffering. So if the people who say this, you look around, they're not suffering. Like, they're getting rewards in this life. They're doing all this stuff in this life, but we're the only ones that are told, yeah, I know you're a slave. God is going to reward you in the end for your sacrifice. Or I know this is bad right now. God is going to reward you in the end. And the end is always on the other side of death. And so it's important for Black people to interrogate this theology of suffering that says, if you're looking at Jesus as the example, his sacrifice is the state response to the work that he did to liberate other people. So that's a healthier way of viewing the Christological thing. What they did in the episode was a common understanding of it, but Black voices are entering the discussion and providing us context for viewing this a healthier way for us.
Yeah, I agree. What I love about this discussion that this has produced in our discussion group on Facebook is it's almost like to trauma bond or not to trauma bond, you know, like it's in some ways kind of a mildly polarizing issue because, you know, some people are like, this is the ultimate love. Like, they've suffered together, they've died together, come back to life together, they've done, and that's what some people in our group, which is mostly Black folks, like that's how some of us understand relationships. And it's almost like not real unless the suffering has happened, you know, and then other people in the group are like, later for that, like that's not it. That's the trap. That's the nature of the trap, to your point, Mike. I also want to offer that maybe even this Christological depiction of Tick in itself represents a return to a type of trauma. And what I mean by that is like a religious trauma, religious imperialism, religious colonization, where we, you know, like Letty spent the whole season trying desperately to return to this Christian home that she imagined for herself, which is filtered through a mother that was not the home, you know, mother being first home, right? That mother wasn't really even the home. So it's almost like the church never really gave her the sustenance she was looking for, but she still appealed to it over and over and over again, looking for something that wasn't there, the same way maybe a child would for a neglectful mother. And I feel like that's almost like when we think of the episode being called Full Circle, like Black people still trying to come back into that Christian house or that Christian theology that hasn't served us. You know, so I was kind of disappointed. Again, we saw the door with the goat's blood once again, and we continue to ignore the significance of the fact that magic is still working, and what that means, and what options that left our characters in this last episode, in this last showdown over magic. So, you know, and last point I'll add, there's another way to look at even Tick as this Christ figure. What comes before that? What is an even more primordial heroic figure? You can talk about Heru, you can talk from ancient Kemet, or Egypt for some folks, you can talk about Shango and Oya, his wife Oya. We even talked about how Letty represents Oya in the previous episode. And so here, then he becomes our Shango, he becomes our deified king, he becomes the force that is moving us ahead for justice, right? Or Shango, for those of you who don't know, he was an actual deified ancestor, a king who lived but was well loved by his people because of his commitment to justice. And this is in the 4th century Oyo Empire in what is now Nigeria. So, so again, it's like there are many different frameworks with which we can interpret this type of thing, and the people in the show are brilliant for dealing in these archetypes that allow us to see our belief systems being acted out. no matter what they really are, because that story is so transcendent. But I also think that when we think about Shango and we think about a return to an African worldview, we see Shango does not die. Shango does not feel the need to sacrifice himself. He battles his people's enemies. You know, he goes to war and he lives. He's the king. He lives. He dances, in fact, right? And Tick's body is rendered still and lifeless, and the sacrifice is made. And again, I feel like that's almost like that's what they want from us, to sacrifice and die and hope for our reward on the other side of things, instead of fighting for our justice and understanding that there's this other side of Jesus. It took the Black women in the 60s to point out there's this other thing, this revolutionary way of looking at things that really doesn't revolve around death and dying and sacrifice and suffering. It revolves around revolutionary action. So
I just want to clarify that this show does a great job highlighting African traditional religions, hoodoo, and things that are ours. And in my explanation that I just gave of the different ways to view atonement, I gave 4. All 4 are Christian. So I'm not trying to negate the belief in Christianity. I'm highlighting that, or raising the idea that there are other beliefs contrary to the common belief that still align. And then you have everything that you're talking about too, Yali. Like, there are other ways to see this. You're not locked into a way of saying this is the only way salvation can occur, because that's simply false and it's dangerous for us.
Mm-hmm. No, that was clear. And I really appreciate you for bringing forward that history of those women trying to move the needle and shift the perspective through the church, and getting people to really look at the possibilities within that.
You know what I was going to say, that you touched on it really quickly. They all go back to the house and they all see the symbol on the door frame, and they all pause. And it's just like how Black folks are with, I know there's another answer, but I'm being told this in so many ways over hundreds and hundreds of years. I'm talking about African Americans, about Christianity. I see it, but they keep focusing on what they already know and how to battle, or what they've been told how to battle, whatever it is coming. And so I think it's a struggle. Here's struggle again. The struggle for the love on that door jamb of what we know probably is the answer, but it's going to require a lot of work, because we don't really have that knowledge that we should be trying to obtain. And I mean, lots of folks obviously know about African traditional religions, but I'm saying in large, we know it's there. We don't want to open it. It's scary for some strange reason. And it's not strange reason. They've told us it's supposed to be scary, when really it's our own. And so every time they go past that door jamb, more and more people begin to recognize that symbol. And I think maybe in season 2, ATRs get the opportunity to shine. I don't know.
We hope and pray. That's important, Pamela. It is. We do default to the familiar, particularly in a crisis.
Exactly. It's comfortable. The devil we know versus the devil we don't know, especially if something that is always portrayed as the devil.
Right. But it's also human though, because things that we learn in our formative years stay with us no matter what we unlearn or add to it or whatever. So it's tied to a bunch of things. Like, life was simpler. I didn't have bills. Maybe my family was together. You know, all of these things kind of create this comfort where you don't interrogate what those things are. And so no matter how aware, woke, or whatever the person is, if you dig deep enough, you're still going to find some things that maybe contradict, maybe don't make a lot of sense, but they hold them because they obtained them during their formative development.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw this idea in there as well. The notion that the Christianity that some of us were brought up with is in a way a reflection of the people that taught it to us. So if I reject my grandmother's prayers and all going to Sunday school and everything that I taught, it's like, well, then what then was her faith? So then people are met with the question of, did that do something? Does this now negate our entire family's foundational upbringing and this and this and this? And I feel like some of that is the battle with accepting that there are layers to this. There are more sides to this than what we know, than what we've been taught. So I just wanted to toss that one in there because I've had that conversation with several people as far as Christianity in the Black community and African traditional religions.
Not to cut you off, there's another part that people don't want to look at when it comes to Jesus Christ after him being sacrificed. The retribution. There are parts where he says he would whet his glittering sword. There are parts where he said he would grind them to powder. There are parts where he said he would drench his garments in blood when he comes back for that revenge. So people will read the part where it says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Then they don't read the part where it says that he would get revenge by the hand of his people. So the people have to be activated as well. It's not just going to be him for those who believe that he will return. So that's the part that they don't want to look at as well. They're fine with turn the other cheek, but they're not fine with the part where he said that he would get revenge upon his return. Of course, you have to wait for that return, and people have heard that for centuries. And a lot of people are just tired of hearing that. But that is there as well. It's clear what he says he would do.
So this brings us into who owns the magic. Who actually owns the magic? That's been the question. It's been tossed back and forth like a tennis match.
This is an interesting concept in that ownership of something that is probably more faith than anything to manifest. And so the fact that, and I want to say whites in this show have created magic, are using magic as a commodity. We know whites commodify throughout all colonialism till today. So magic to them means that it is to be spent, used in a way and manner that doesn't matter who it destroys or how it destroys. And so we're looking at how they're using it. And the fact that they take it back, because we know that the language was Yahima's language. We know that, what's his name? Braithwaite couldn't do anything without her knowledge. So the fact that it belonged to people of color is the crux of it. But now Black folks have it. And so our ownership of it means, what do we do with it? Do we do the same thing that Justin was just talking about, vengeance? Do we take magic and do it in a way that it's never been done before? Or that we try and remember, remember the way it was when we had it? I'm glad we have it back, purportedly. But I wonder, what will we do with it? And I'm talking about 2020. If we've got the magic now, what will we do with it? That's probably, leaves me with more questions than anything. We've done the protests, quick, fast, in a hurry. That portion may be over and maybe restarting again on November the 4th. So what do we do when we do have the magic that we've since obtained it, Do we really have the ownership of it? Do we even believe? It gives me more questions than it answers.
One of the things that was stood out for this in this episode was that Letty and Tick, and like they knew what to do with the book. Like they knew what to do. Letty got her crash course in the language, and then she was good. She was speaking in tongues the rest of the show. But Christina was studying like she was studying for the SAT. She was like, I've been working on this spell. And so when we got it, it was a quick learning curve. We climbed that learning curve quickly. And so the question is, does that indicate who the magic actually belongs to, or who is more familiar or better equipped to handle that magic?
I believe it does. Came naturally to her because it's naturally ours. They had to study it and dissect it because it's not natural for them, for her.
And this is really just such a great metaphor for the way things seem to work on a cultural and a spiritual level. Like, we have been reminded throughout this whole show. I remember one of my good friends that's in our group, our Facebook group, Corinne, she was pointing out the red symbolism throughout the whole show, blood and red clothing and like little pops of color, red ribbons everywhere, right? And it comes back down to, it's in our blood. It's in the blood. right? We're not just talking about the blood of Jesus. We're talking about the blood of Letty, the blood of the ancestors, the blood of every single Black character on this show. The power is first and foremost in your blood before you even get to the book. The fact that you are predisposed to take and appropriate what's in that book so effortlessly is your blood. When they stop and look at the blood on the door, it's in your blood. It's like a constant reminder symbolically that we only need to look to our blood to find the answers. Everything else is mechanics. Everything else is just the accoutrement that go with it. But everybody, and then other folks have to do all the studying and calculating and things like that. This is like even with Hippolyta and her wrist devices. There is a point at which she would not need those anymore, right? And she got there so quickly. She took a couple of trips and Beyonce was like, I mean, if you want to join, I mean, you don't even, these are crutches, these are mechanics. Christina was using crutches the whole time because I don't think Christina could function without them, but we were flying and rolling and floating and swimming, with the magic because of the blood. And I think that that's such an important message. And I think to the point back about Christianity, and such an important point, Pamela, you made about and Taylor, your point about your grandmother, I really feel like imperial religions, like these globalizing, proselytizing religions, I'm talking about imperialist Christianity, right? Obviously there are different approaches to Christianity, but I think that particular religion that colonized, subjugated people practice is a vessel that is really filled by the spirit of Black and brown people. That is what animates that Christianity and makes it real in the spiritual world. Our hopes, our dreams, our traditions, our approaches to baptism, our blood. Without that, what is it? What is it really? Then those Korean gospel choirs are gospel choirs because of what we added to the religion that wasn't in there before. That spirit, that African spirit that's in the music that we brought. Like, I think that we really have to really, again, give ourselves credit for that. And I feel like the show is constantly referencing that. I just want to say that.
Absolutely. We are always the commodity, whether it's our labor, our blood, and the fact that our imagination, always they're able to capitalize on it and walk away with it like, ta-da. And it's really like, no, this was mine. I thought of it. And when Taylor, you said about, it feels like I might be disrespecting my grandmother and what she has poured into and invested into. And Yelly, you just brought it together, but your grandmother made it her own. And that you are not disrespecting. What you may be disrespecting is how she got it, but what she did with it once she got a hold of it is what you respect. It's not disrespectful. It's just, you know what? It's on you to take it and just make it your own, the next level.
But also, like, it humanizes our ancestors, which is an important thing to do. It's okay for them to not have known everything just right or perfectly or whatever. It doesn't mean that I'm disrespecting my grandmother when I know that you can actually be on the phone during the thunderstorm. It's okay. It's going to, but it's just the thing that she believed at the time, and that's okay. I acknowledge that. And I also know something else. There's no disrespect there or anything to take away from your ancestors.
Oh my God, that example. So when is an ally an ally? And speaking about Christina and Ruby.
Yeah. So this whole episode was who is my friend? Who really is going to hold the line for me? So you think that Ruby and Christina, have finally worked something out, but then you get an inkling, oh, Ruby finally switched up. And unfortunately, she got found out. And then you see Ruby hug up on Letty and say, look, I got you the blood. Here we go with the blood again. But, and you find out that is also a Decepticon, And you go further, and Letty is trying to, she becomes the link in Tick's family as a woman to have the book passed on to her. So who's my ally there? All of his female lineage becomes her allies. And she's still got to deal with whether Ruby is her ally, who she believes is. We find out, of course, it's not. And so throughout this entire episode, everybody's trying to check for who is really going to help me to the end. You know, we have that one serene moment in Woody where everybody's singing, you know, Kumbaya, basically. But it's all up in the wind. When it comes down to it, who's going to fight for me? You know?
Ruby's downfall was consorting with outside sources rather than keeping it all in the family because she had issues with Letty. She needed to look past those issues to the bigger picture, keeping it in the family. By consorting with outside sources, namely Christina, no, that was her downfall.
I love the car scene though, and I think Taylor, we have it in our plans to discuss family, but the song that they were singing in the car, the Life Could Be a Dream, you know, like it really made me think about the full circleness of the episode, because that's literally the first song we hear in the show, episode 1, when Tick wakes up from his dream on the bus. And it really, to your point, Pamela, it made me think about how sometimes like characters in this show have been suffering under the illusion of friendship or the illusion of some sort of connection or an illusion of a family bond that wasn't really what it should be. Right. And then had to get really real by episode 10, you know, and all of those bonds were tested, all of those relationships were tested, and some people found out the hard way that it wasn't what they thought it was. So the life could be a dream, or like, you know, life is but a dream. All of those concepts are floating around the whole season. So I thought that was a really excellent way to bring it full circle to like, you know, and then Tick's dream turned out to be very much reality, right? So yeah, I thought that
his dream was the whole season.
And somebody else pointed out that was the song that Ruby said she wasn't going to do. And that was their clue that maybe that's not her.
She said shaboom, shaboom, shaboard. She didn't like the song.
Right.
So keeping with this, this idea of family, the strength of the family. Thoughts on that, Mike? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Earlier in the episode, when Letty met Ruby in the cemetery, she said, we just call ourselves family. And then she also said, it's not an obligation, it's acceptance, a willingness to sacrifice everything necessary in order to protect it. So this is the commentary that they're providing on family, that this is what it actually is. It's not, as the other was pointing out, like Montrose and Tick's relationship, like their father and son in name only, but they haven't really interacted that way. It's not what we pretend it is. It's something that we create. And this is so powerful for Black people because we've had to create families that were outside of our biological network. And it wasn't our design. It was something that was forced upon us, but we were able to take that and create what we needed to in order to survive. And so now in this car, we're seeing all of these people who came together in order to survive. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for how we exist in America.
It was crazy. First of all, Jihad is sitting in the car with Letty. And a lot of people were like, well, how did we get here? You know, let's really think about that. The mother of your child is sitting in the same car, riding or dying. This is a ride or die life. Car ride we're taking for real. With your other lover who she has told you, you know she loves you. These people have had some real grown folks conversations that a lot of you out there are not having. That you might want to have. We call it co-parenting now, right? So I'm assuming in season 2, little George Freeman is going to be co-parented by a Korean woman, a Black woman, an Afro-future hip who might, you know, float in and out. And just to Mike's point, that basically we are good at stitching together with whatever is thrown to us. You know, we will bite the bullet, suck it up, just to get to the conclusion that we want or are desirous of. So if it means I gotta, sit down, hunker down with these particular people who I guess the enemy of my friend is my enemy and whatever the phrase is, we will do it because we are trying to get to whatever the goal is. So.
See, this how you know it's African, because that's a co-wife, okay? Gia is the co-wife for the man. She is wife number two for the man.
Number two. Well, she was one, and then along came Letty. Number two.
And in other cultures, there were concubines. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. When one wife is pregnant, the other wife is doing something. So there's a continuity.
There is a system.
Not practice over here.
Well, you got to have a lot of money to be. It's a whole lot of people that can't support themselves. They ain't got no business trying to have all these other people around.
How much money does Tick have?
He don't have no job. He quit his job to run around and
and now he has sister wives.
Yeah,
he's managing.
Just driving.
Don't be like Tick, because Tick didn't have the money to.
Well, let's mention he did have a job, because everybody kept saying that he ain't got no job, but he did have a job in Florida that he left.
Yeah.
Plus, as a veteran, he could probably get the hookup to some degree.
Yeah.
Some degree.
I mean, but he has the book. He just can't he just osmose some funds and benefits, and I don't know how that works. I don't know what the limitations on the blood is, but I feel like it could cover. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but he could die. They could all die. So I feel like, Tick went and, to your point, had a really mature conversation with Gia. I think they sorted out a lot of things about what it was and what it wasn't and what kind of love it was, right? Like, I think they really did have a real connection. I think, but I think Gia and Tick left that table at that little bar or whatever very clear that the connection wasn't what he has with Letty, but it was something that was necessary for their growth, each of them. And once they worked that out, I think Letty just had to dig into her trust and focus on the bigger picture. As you said, everybody had to get with that bigger picture up in Woody on their way to, an uncertain future. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, and along with Letty having to dig deep, this notion of Black women praying for you and everything in between, because Letty was in the church putting in work in the middle of this,
Episode after episode, we saw Letty in church more and more, trying to figure it out. By the way, her mom probably taught her. I mean, everything that I think we've seen about religion with Letty, she keeps referring back to her mom, including the shaman who comes to the house. Everything she got through her mom. And so the fact that we have this phenomenal prayer circle over Braithwaite, and it is every generation of Black woman that is from Tick's lineage that not only prays, they do whatever they have to do through the spell to get rid of Braithwaite, or at least take what they need from him in order to get to the next level. And so when you hear people say, I had a praying grandmother, somebody prayed over me, this is the ultimate scene of that. And it's like, I get it. I just want to roll down and sit here and be like, somebody prayed over me. Had to. And they've been praying. They were waiting in different rooms and realms for them so that they could give them the information that they needed. So this scene is just phenomenal to me.
It was like a prayer relay.
Whew.
Really was. Yeah.
And they had to send them back. Here's the thing. I brought you and you're here to help me, but I've got to send you back. My obligation is to place you back in that plane. Mm-hmm. I have to say goodbye to what I know has to be the strongest I've ever felt in my life, to those who've given me that strength. It was just crazy.
And beyond the prayer, I mean, these are the actors of the story. So you have Hannah, whose spell it was that did all of the work, who was brave enough to take the book of names and escape. You have Hattie, who was the guardian of the book of names, which made all of this possible. You have Dora, who is the mother of Tick, who carries that line. to make all of it, and also manages a lot of dynamics between George and Montrose and all this stuff to make sure that Tick is able to be here. I mean, she stood up to Montrose's father and all that stuff. And then you have who was the last one? Letty, who's also, we've seen her work throughout the whole episode. So yes, that prayer circle is powerful because they're covering him, but also they did the work to get us to this point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In each of their times.
She created a spiritual house for them, a meeting space in the spirit world without even fully realizing that that's what she created. Like, it was fiery. And again, in her one interpretation of fire, she was burning and suffering. And this was, she realized that this was magic that she created. And it was a space she created to meet with her ancestors and her descendants and powwow. This is the war room. And that this fire is a cleansing fire and a fire of purification, a fire of inspiration, a fire of get it done. Like, y'all, and then when the four ancestors stood there, like, you know, I'm thinking about numerology and numbers and ancient Kemet, and like the four representing the foundation of anything else we plan to build. Four is foundational, right? So like the fact that Hannah was brilliant enough at that time under the duress of slavery and pregnancy and rape and assault to be like, long game, we making sure white people don't have access to this magic anymore. I don't care how many lifetimes have to happen. I'm working beyond this lifetime to make sure this doesn't happen. I'm working through my descendants to make sure this doesn't happen. Like, I mean, I don't even know if you can call that intelligence. That's just like, but that's stuff people, that, I mean, like, that's actually like a legitimate part of the worldview. And there are stories like that. There are really legitimately stories about people who make spiritual plans and enact spiritual plans. And like you said, like, we are surviving on this planet because of the prayers of our foremothers and fathers. We are literally here because of those prayers. I don't care what tradition or religion they prayed in. They put their spiritual energy into that prayer. They envisioned our lives. And that's why we're sitting here talking about this. Like, just,
yeah. Blood and intent. Blood and intent. From those four women is blood and intent. And Tick was the body.
The prayer is the incantation.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I love that she said that, what did she say? The fire was my rage made manifest. That was my favorite line that whole episode. And she's just standing there just in the fire. She's like, this is my rage. That's what you guys have been looking at. What's been in your dreams and all this. That's actually what this space was created out of. Like, you know what I mean? And rage.
We're taught not to embrace our rage and not to feel our anger, which is completely justified. The things that have been done to us, and when she embraced her rage, I love that. That's a powerful message.
That was a powerful message. I was like, oh my God. I mean, you've seen so many powerful women literally fighting against the trope of angry Black woman. Rage made manifest. Like, that just like blew me away.
Don't they call that prophetic rage?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Don't the Christian liberation theologists call that prophetic rage? Yeah,
it's a righteous violence, or it's the prophetic voice that does that. It's that's exactly what they call it.
So I don't even know if this can connect to this necessarily, but the idea of, do Black people ever learn for always forgiving? If we're going to keep with this rage and dealing with turning the other cheek and sorting through, taking the higher road and all this and this, do we ever learn for forgiving?
So that requires some interrogation on our part. Yali mentioned the imperialist Christianity, which is the fountain that a lot of this pours out of. Yes, Christianity is a thing. It was a thing before this version of Christianity existed and was given or forced onto enslaved Africans. But it was a Christianity, they received a version of Christianity that basically said, it's okay that you're slaves. We can't do anything now. Like we talked about earlier, you'll get your reward. But that was so they wouldn't kill their masters. So that's been the emphasis. So you'll see those things raised up, turn the other cheek, forgive 70 times 7. They'll raise up Martin Luther King Jr. because he was the one that presented the version of integration that they could deal with, where Malcolm was presenting something else that they didn't want to hear. And so they said no to King first. Then when Malcolm came, with the way he said it, then they looked at Martin Luther King and said, well, tell us about this thing again. And so that when you keep raising up the things that prevent you from liberating yourself, that's an area of interrogation that we have to ask, like, why are we doing that? Who taught us that? Who said God said that thing?
Mm-hmm.
Now, who said that the master's tools will never destroy the master's house?
Audre Lorde.
There you go. So this form of Christianity is a master's tool. Why are we leaning on the everlasting arms of it, asking for freedom? It is illogical on a lot of levels that I can't even tackle, but isn't it time we gave up on being nice, on being passive?
So in the context of the show, Dee is reading the book from George that says if they were ever going to truly disrupt the hierarchy of the warlocks, they would have to spill blood other than their own. Mm-hmm. And so that message is, Tick can offer himself as a sacrifice, but he's not the only one that's going to have to die if y'all are going to make it through this. But everyone else, all the other adults, left Christina alive, but Dee got the message. She knew we can't be the only ones out here dying. And so Christina is the one that, and she was the first of that group that was like, all right, well, you got to catch it. I mean, Dee pulled out that, I'm sorry, that arm that she got, like, I wanted to, I know it was, whatever, but Hip could have gone anywhere into the future to get her a better arm than that. That arm was, why they ain't go further into the future? They ain't go to like 2003. They went to the 1980s MIT science lab.
Mike,
to get an arm with all these tubes in it, and like get the Winter Soldier arm for the girl, and
Mike,
let her.
Mike, what you're not gonna do in this moment of liberation?
She could have gone anywhere in the future. Why didn't she go further into the future to get a future arm?
Well, maybe she didn't go into the future. Maybe she built it right then and there with what she had.
Mike, don't hate on her first gen arm. It got the job done. Okay.
Yeah, I hope she get an upgrade eventually. It worked though.
That down, season 2.
Right.
Upgrade.
Great.
Got it.
But how do we feel about her being Beyonce, and how that's, again, it really is Gen 1 of her arm, because like eventually she gets the whole.
There's 2 schools of thought. So there's 2 theories.
Okay.
The one theory is that she's not Beyonce, but that she's the hooded figure with the robotic arm.
I want that one.
That pushed back through the portal. And she's just been living and becoming this all-power, ethereal, amazing goddess out in the universes. Then there's the other train of thought or theory that she, starting with the arm, rebuilt herself and just piece by piece rebuilt her entire body, created herself into an android, and saved only her head, which was her creative, beacon. So she saved her mind, and from that became Beyonce. And it sort of follows that train of the events of her challenging her mother to be who she created her to be in her comics. So she's, you remember, she's like, you're not a prisoner. My mama named that comic just all since the beginning. Just be who you're the heroine of this story. Period. I've created you that way. Be that. And then Hip does. And now she's rocking the blue hair. And she is literally becoming the manifestation of who her daughter, Dee, that might be this creative force, Beyonce. So those are the 2 the two sort of theories. There's some people that think she's the robotic arm woman, and some think that it just started with the arm. So we don't know yet. And they connected her to the Beyonce because of the hair when she was coming out of her
curse.
Purgatory, yeah. And so, what was our other note about this? Do Black people ever learn? Dee actually said they still haven't learned. Will they ever learn? That's actually all she said before she popped Christina's neck. Is that what I have in my notes? They still haven't learned, is what Dee said. Who's they? Who is Dee talking about?
I said it was Black folks because it's Letty and Hip, Mary Martha, and Mary Magdalene who walk off Jiha and leave Christina alive. And I think Dee came along, you know, there's a lot of mafia movies and there's always a cleaner. The cleaner comes along, does what he needs to do, you know, and takes care of the body. I believe Dee is a cleaner. He took care of the body. Thank you.
Makes sense to me. I think she was speaking about Black people as well, because they don't want to go full circle, which is putting the work in and bringing it to fruition and completion, which means you have to go all in. There has to be bloodshed. Black people don't want to uproot their lives and change from what it is. They want to continue on by just getting along rather than go all the way.
And Dee at this point has already seen the crookedness of cops. She has seen her best friend be murdered. She has attended his funeral. She has seen a lot. And she's going, will they ever learn? This is the person that started all this. Like, this woman, why is she laying here under this rock asking for my help?
And not to mention her father. George was our first major casualty on the show, and so she lost her father, her best friend, her mother disappeared for however long. She was neglected by the grown-ups. They were going through craziness. She had a curse and was chased down by cops and curses, and she was like, they will never learn. Like, this begins with the death of us, and the only way it can end is with the death of them. Like, Christina is relentless. She will stop at nothing. Have we not got the message? Is Tick not just, didn't they just carry off this man's dead body? Where does it end? You know, and Dee was like, I gotta end it. And I think, there's a pivot in there somewhere, maybe a subtle one, but I got the message. I feel like she was. Pamela, I believe you are right. I believe she was talking to us Black people. Like, are we always going to have to choose to be the self-sacrificing, long-suffering, more human than human, righteous people who only, who believe that they don't have the right to lethal force when people are using lethal force against them? Are we going to continue to be that people?
So goes back to
go ahead, Justin.
I was just going to say briefly, it goes back to a very simple thing: an eye for an eye. It's very simple. And they left the job incomplete by leaving Christina there to survive or regenerate or seek help, complete the job. She had to be finished off.
So I know this may sound, to some people who are not used to hearing this type of talk, it's important to know that no one has ever been liberated by asking nicely. It just doesn't work that way. Oppressors don't care about that. If your framework is a Christian framework, yes, Jesus did say, forgive 70 times 7, but Jesus also said, if you cause one of these little ones to sin or prevent them from getting to me, it's better for a millstone to be tied around your neck and thrown into the sea. There's no forgiveness there. There's no option for redemption. You drown. And so, which Jesus are you serving if that's your framework? It's just one of those things where it's uncomfortable to talk about, but the reason why it must end in violence is because the oppressor requires that it does. They have the option of doing something else, but they refuse. And you got an option. You got door number 2.
Yep. Russell Maroon Shoatz talks about it in terms of violence and counter-violence. And it's like violence has its own inertia. And what's going to stop this but an equal force? If you don't stop a force with an equal or greater amount of force, it will simply continue along its path, right? And this is such an important question that Black people really need to like wrestle with. Like, I see the scene of Dee killing Christina at the end as one of the most polarizing scenes in this episode, particularly in terms of our group discussion. You know, some people are like, is she evil now? Is she a villain now? The only way you could look at that scene after the death of our hero, the killing of our hero, and think Dee is somehow a bad person now, is if you don't understand that that is justice. If you don't see Tick's life having equal value to Christina's life. If you don't see that what Christina did is abject evil, it was impersonal evil, cold and impersonal evil, right? For personal gain and self-interest. And that this has to end, and the only way that you can end it is through killing, that this is righteous and justified killing, then yeah, like, and I think that that's the thing that really strikes me, that people would now look at this. I mean, I know people have an issue with her being a child killing, but we have a history with that. Like, in a crisis situation, our ancestors didn't have the luxury of protecting children from violence because our children were not protected from violence. Dee has not been protected from violence throughout this whole season. Everyone has addressed her like an adult to be able to take care of herself, fend for herself, defend herself, provide, you know, emotional support for herself, right? And so she went through her ritual. She was adultified. Her innocence has been gone. So she's like, I'm an equal player on this playing field. I'm gonna do what comes to me, what I think is right based on my knowledge, based on her reading of the book, right? Maybe some things she saw with Hippolyta when she traveled to get that arm, whatever, we don't know, but I feel like we have a history with that. Our children went through the bondage that their parents went through. You know, our children participated in some of our revolutionary movements. Our children had to pick up guns. In many states in this country, adults had a curfew. If you were over the age of 14, you had to be in the house, in the cabins, in the quarters by dark. Who then went out to meet, collect supplies, make plans? Who was out on the battlefield? Who was going into French encampments and sleeping with these pedophile soldiers trying to collect ammunition and weapons? Kids. It was kids. The people who helped the Amistad Africans take over that ship, 4 little Black girls who found the guns, found the machetes, and gave them to the men. Like, so we've always, unfortunately, being put in a crisis like this that we've been in for hundreds of years has caused us to kind of, yes, adultify the children, even though the white society also adultifies our children in a different way. It is a loss of innocence, but again, I don't think anyone should be questioning whether or not Dee is a good character or if she did the right thing.
Mm-hmm. So that was our question. Who decides Black children are children?
Right.
Who's making that decision?
Right.
We have to.
I'm sorry, Justin, go ahead.
I was just saying, we have to make that decision. We can't let the others make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, whites have a tendency today to, when you charge a child with whatever crime, they're charged as adults. And they're written in newspapers as an adult. And the actuality is that they are never treated as children. They are adultified, but way before their time. I was going to say, Yelly, you mentioned about justice and how we're always saying no justice, no peace. And to me, when you said that, I was thinking about how empty it rings, because we keep saying no justice, no peace, but we keep offering peace. We invariably keep offering peace time and time again, because we are the kings and queens that, you know what, I don't want any trouble. I don't want to, I just want to get home to my family, because we're tired. Collectively, I can truthfully say, I believe all Black people in America are tired. And so we just want that peace. We keep offering that peace, but there is never any justice. So maybe it's time to become like these and say, you know what, let's just tie this up. Let's tie it up in the manner that you have been showing us how it really works for us, you know. November the 4th. I think we're gonna find out.
November 3rd. Don't tell them the wrong day. It's important.
No, the 3rd is the voting
Oh,
day.
you said
It's
you gonna find out November 4th. Okay, yeah.
The aftermath.
No, I was like, don't mess us up here.
They've been trying
Yeah,
it.
you're right.
The aftermath.
Yeah.
So, but what about the question of like children who choose to take adult actions, right? I mean, obviously it comes from somewhere, but like another question is, well, now her soul is tainted because she's taken a life, you know, like what, you know, again, from my perspective, I'm thinking, well, our ancestors had rituals for that. Like if you had to go and do killing in the name of something just and righteous, you could be cleansed of that action. They had rituals for that before they started slave rebellions, so-called slave rebellions. They did. Maybe we lost some of that because we moved into someone else's religion and lost that tool. But yeah, that was a question that came up. What do y'all think?
Christina was gonna die anyway under all them bricks. That was a humane act of killing her by the neck. She wasn't going nowhere.
Like a broken leg on a horse?
Yeah.
Shoot.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Mike. I'm with you.
Like a broken neck on a horse.
Broken leg on a horse. You got to shoot a horse. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
Though I don't think that was kindness, but she did her a kindness by killing her there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that's how some people have to see it.
I mean, I don't have an issue with her killing Christina. I mean, she saw her friend who was her age get shot and dragged and thrown into the water by a fan. Like, what do you expect? They in it now. We had a whole episode, like you said, Yali, about her rite of passage to become an adult. So let's stop looking at her like that. She got a whole black chaga. Like, nobody got that. So she's grown.
Mm-hmm.
She's grown.
Yep, absolutely.
She owed her one anyway because Christina was willing to leave her to die by not helping to get the spell off of her by getting the blood from Lancaster, which she could have, but she chose to just let him die in front of her, not get the blood, not help Dee. And you saw the condition she was in. So now that she's better, she came to finish the job. That goes back to an eye for an eye. She read the book. She knew what transpired.
Mm-hmm. Self-serving. There's so many commentaries in that. People were hollering in the group about white feminism and the commentary on helping versus not helping versus when it serves you to help versus.
So I don't know if this was I don't think this was in the outline, but you just brought this up, Taylor. So I am pleased that there was no redemption for that Christina character. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people were hanging on, you know, to see what her story arc was going to become. But in the end, she was just like anyone else that's white who wanted to use black bodies for their own gain. She wanted to kill Tick and take his body. Her explanation of Ruby was, I'm not a bad person. I just need his entire life to further my own ends. Like, so no, there's no redemption for that character. You're evil. Die under a rock with a hand around your neck because you don't deserve anything else. You're just gonna keep doing what you've been doing. Mm-hmm. I know that's disappointing to some people. Some people say it's typical. Yes, it's typical. Be better.
Mm-hmm. You know what it reminded me of, and I hate to even use this as an example because of the controversy surrounding these two characters, but it kind of reminded me of what Killmonger said when he just said, you know what, you're gonna have to kill me because I'm not changing. If you let me live, I'm just gonna do what I set out to do. That's what that dynamic reminded me of. It's like, no, I'm better off dead because I'm definitely not going to be your slave. I'm definitely not going to bow to anything that you're trying to do. You might as well. Like, that's how I saw the whole Christina thing going. Because if Dee had let her live, who knows? You know, like that wasn't going to change. I didn't see any redemptive arc in Christina's future at all. As sure as she has bodies and comas in her basement, where most people have Christmas decorations. She is not a person that is going to just suddenly do something different. So I know people were arguing it and they were holding out hope. They did completely not what we expected to do. People that you thought weren't going to come through, like Gia, did. People that they hoped would, didn't. Ruby is, Lord knows. You know what I mean? Like,
that's the other thing about Christina. Like, she kept the white bodies alive because she saw a different value in them. Like, she kept, what is her name? The mediocre white woman. Yeah, Dell. She kept her alive, even though she didn't have a purpose for her at the time. And she eventually found it in Ruby, but she supposedly had feelings for Ruby, and Ruby just died because she didn't see any value in keeping that black body around any longer. No, that character is horrible. I'm glad she's gone.
I think, is Ruby in a coma?
She said, that's why I had to kill your sister. That's what she said to Letty.
Yeah, I think she was lying about that.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, the flashback shows Ruby in a coma in the bed.
Was she in the coma? Oh, I need to look at it again. Okay.
Yeah, Ruby's
Yeah,
in
she said she had to
bed.
keep him in a coma.
Yeah, she's with the rest of them. So now there's a trio down there in the basement.
So she's keeping Ruby in a coma. Okay, that's interesting.
No, I think Dell is gone. Dell is gone.
Yeah, Dell is gone. It was Ruby cut hers off.
And William's body.
Okay, so now we're clear. It's so sad. Like, I think the saddest part of the comments were the folks that really were looking for redemption in Christina and just needed her to be a good white person. I find that a lot with movies that try to tell the truth without that Hollywood point of entry, good white savior character that allows white audiences to say, that's me, I'm the good white person. Like, this show didn't give no outs, no breathing room for white folks to like absolve themselves of any guilt or responsibility by attaching themselves to this one good white character. I think that that's good because it's a maturing of the way we present our stories and talk about race. I think it's so important. This is my favorite part of this episode, that Christina was not redeemed at the end, because we're always looking for that exceptional white person. The white exceptionalism of it all is like so tiring to me and so overdone. Like, instead of understanding the rule, right? The exception, the rule. The rule is killing us. The rule is everywhere. The rule is the toxic, racist ocean we're swimming in, and y'all trying to cling so tight to this exception. And it doesn't serve you to do that. So I'm so glad, because I really would not have wanted to see a season 2 where they're still battling Christina. Like, I just, that would have lost me. And I think now there's, to the point Mike made at the top of this, there's so many more possibilities now. There's so many more possibilities of envisioning a future where now we've got a different set of challenges, and it's really about the process of liberation.
So that brings us to plot lines. I can't get no satisfaction.
Man, oh man. It left us, and I really felt like I was left with more questions than, I thought if this was just one season, you were going to tie it up nicely for me. But I have no idea where Hip is going. I have no clue about what Dee's going to do. I'm left to figure out, maybe they're in multi-universes together doing whatever. I have no idea how Montrose is going to raise George. Is he really going to turn over a new leaf and learn how to be, a great grandfather? I'm just like, you guys left me with a hell of a lot of questions.
So lumped in with this these are also our speculations for season 2. If they gave us a season 2, we already heard that Misha said that the book was just the foundation. They were not following the book to the letter. It was literally just the groundwork, which means it can go anywhere, absolutely anywhere. And now that they have killed off their primary antagonist, who knows? Now, I want to throw this theory out there. I saw this one floating around in the group. Somebody proposed, what if they wake up William and Ruby, they bring them out of their coma, and William continues Christina's work because Christina was sort of, sort of placating Ruby. Like she was playing Ruby, but William wakes up and he is just genuine 1950s racist and is thinking like, who is this Black woman and why is she why does she care about me and this and that? I've got work to do. And he just wakes up and he just like goes back to business. Ruby's shattered. Everyone's looking like, see, we told you. And they go into season 2 with William carrying the torch, but without any remorse and no flame for Ruby, and all that whole narrative goes out the window.
That sounds good to me. Because it serves her right by being deceived by the outside source. And that's what had a lot of people deceived in the group, because they see the feelings between Ruby and Krillium, and, you know, had people thinking that there was some sort of redemptive portion to Christina, which there was not, which is why her life ended the way it did. So I kind of like that plot line.
Somebody asked that. They were like, well, what do we think William was like? And someone was like, racist. This was 19. What do you mean? What do we wonder? We think that he was just extra strength racist for the 1950s, and he's not going to care anything about whatever this side thing was. And Ruby's beautiful Black self is going to just be shattered and have to rejoin the Avengers and get over it and try to help them save the world. Like that's.
Well, William was a part of the House of Winthrop, which means, and he was already doing scientific experiments with Hiram. So yeah, he was a hella racist. Of course he was.
Wasn't he in a relationship with Christina?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, they like each other. They the same.
Yes.
It makes sense to me.
They want him to wake up and be.
I don't want that at all. I don't want any of that.
Why are you asking a racist to get up from a coma? Stop it.
Who's rooting for that?
Exactly. He had to be super racist. Look at him. He's got that whole look that'll deceive people, just like the serpent. And he's in that lodge.
I think the only thing that would make that interesting is if shattered Ruby, heartbroken Ruby, is the one who kills him. Because there's no way William, with no memory of the events that have transpired, can stand a chance against these empowered Black people, the Avengers. They're going to make quick work of him. And I think Ruby needs to be the one to do it. And I could watch that. I definitely could watch that.
It's nice like that.
Yeah, because I need to see Ruby evolve a little more. Like Ruby still got the residue of like I worship whiteness on her, and I think I need to see some of that skin shed a little more to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the episode ended, I was having a problem because I was like, well, they only gonna do one season of this, because who is going to be the antagonist in season 2? And I was just having an issue. I was like, oh, they left this one season. And then I saw that as the show challenging me. What does it look like? We've gotten these characters who are now liberated. They don't have to battle against the magic that white people had. And so now what do they do? And I took it as that personal challenge. Like, if I can't imagine something else, then what's wrong with me? Like, what do they do now that they're liberated? Have I thought that far beyond my freedom to have some ideas about what that looks like? So for season 2, you got all of these people with the Shoggoth and all of these powers heading right into the civil rights movement. I'm like, yeah, let's go. The monster was Jim Crow, and it's still there, but now we got the power and they don't. Let's see what that looks like. I want to see how these historic events can occur now that we have this ability and that they don't.
And you've got those 33 lodges who have got to catch up on the information about, they stole the magic. You think they're gonna lay that down and let that no. There is another like an odyssey, a journey. This is Homer, they're on their way to something huge, I believe.
Yeah, dozens and dozens of white dudes sat down that day to eat their raw kidney dinner together and like realized wasn't nothing popping. Like, wait a minute. I just want to see that, I just want to see that. I want to see civil rights movement plus magic. I want to see that. I'm with you, Mike. I want to see that. Okay.
But do the lodges know who took the magic from them? Do they all communicate with each other?
They do. I think they do. because when they had that big lodge meeting to decide if Lancaster is going to take over, he was politicking to try and get them, to agree for it to be him. And so I think those two cops that were still left in the room when Christina as William showed up to Lancaster's death, they run and tell it on the mountain. They got that information out like, yo, you're not gonna believe what happened.
Right. Plus Lancaster ran into that force field at the door. So he probably passed it on to the rest of the lodges.
And now he's dead.
Oh, speaking of that being dead, just activated my thought. The cop that was thrown through the portal, that was a question in the group as well. What happens with him? If he's like somewhere else trying to mess things up. A lot of people were just saying that he was a crony, he's nobody, but that's a wild card as far as plot lines go.
A loose end, him just floating around in the ether, just doing stuff.
If they
we didn't even have a name for that guy. Yeah, because Tree's still in Boston. I said we don't even have a name for that cop. So if he were to come back and do something, we wouldn't know it was him. So I think he's just gone.
If they bring him back, they got to bring Tree back. At the minimum.
Where is Tree?
He's in Boston.
He's in the wind.
I hope Lancaster didn't get him.
I mean, Tick is a black man. Tick is a black man in America in 1955. Anything could have happened to Tick.
Wait a minute, Justin, are you suggesting that the black body that we saw Frankenstein together might have been Tree?
Could be. Could be. It could be anything. I mean, who was it?
He's the only one that is not accounted for. I know that.
He's MIA. He's either that happened to him or he's somewhere telling lies on his member again.
I thought we were making headway. Gaining ground. We just lost 15 steps.
Yeah, Tree is just a metaphor for don't lie on your meat. You're gonna get left behind in Boston. Ain't nobody gonna care about what happens to you. They ain't gonna mention you in the finale. It's over.
Every time I think. There it is.
All chakras matter, okay? The upper ones and the lower ones. Okay? It must be addressed, these issues.
Yeah, we went there for the people who want to share gifts all the time and gifs or whatever it is. And
on
the thread.
Finale episode. There you have it. We have given those are our thoughts. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments and politic with us over what might happen in season 2. What did we miss from season 1, episode 10? There was a lot in it. Until next time.
It was fun.
And behave yourself in the group.
Awesome, guys.
Join us, but behave yourself. Good night.
Well,
Good night.
Good night, guys.